and welcome to everyone, both members, officers and anyone that might be kind of watching on the live stream. I hope all are safe and well. Obviously today is what we call in the Rail North Committee consultation book call. Because of the current situation with COVID, we've taken the collective decision not to have a formal meeting in person because of all the challenges that entails, but to have this meeting virtually, which obviously can help inform the work of our officers on the issues that they need to be doing on our behalf before our next formal board and committee meetings in the coming months. Obviously, if we work our way through the agenda, we've got welcome and apologies. So David, are we aware of any apologies that need to be tendered at this stage?
We had apologies from Mayor Andy Burnham, and just wanted to highlight that Councillor Trevor Ainsworth was the previous representative for East Midlands. They're in the process of appointing a new representative as Councillor Ainsworth has moved on to another portfolio, I understand. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, thanks ever so much for that, David. And yes, if we can record our thanks to Trevor for all his work over a number of years, because he has been a very active participant in the work of the committee. Are there any other apologies that anyone else wants to raise? I can't see any indications, so I shall take that there aren't. Second item obviously is declarations of interest, and that's just me to remind all members if there is anything they need to inform us of as a declaration, either now or anything that may crop up during debate and discussion that they feel they need to make a declaration, please don't hesitate to do so we can record it accordingly. And again, I can't see any indications, so let's move on to the third item, which is the part 1 minutes of our last meeting that we held virtually on the 25th of March. I'm conscious because we're not a formal committee meeting, technically we won't be able to fully approve these today. That will have to wait until we have a full constituted in-person committee. But are we happy that that's an accurate record of everything that happened on the 25th of March that we can endorse accordingly and obviously recommend acceptance for at the next formal meeting if we're agreeable to that? And again, I'm not seeing any indications of dissent, so I will take that as read. Okay, let's move into some of the detailed work then. The fourth item is the report titled Priorities for Future Rail Services. I think we're going to allow about half an hour to deal with this so we can get into the sort of nitty gritty of it. And I think Salim Patel is going to be presenting this one for us. So Sal, over to yourself.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not proposing to go through the whole paper. I mean, members will be very much aware about what this issue is about, so I'm just going to have a little run through and I'll allow as much time as possible for discussion afterwards. So members will be very aware that the consultation was released on the 11th of June and it has been released individually by operators as well. This really seeks to take advantage of the investment in infrastructure and rolling stock that's been made on the East Coast Main Line. And in advance of the release of this consultation, we, TFN, held a member briefing as well. Many of you will have attended as well. From my point of view and from TFN's point of view, we heard very much loud and clear the strength of feeling across members for the proposals and the impact this is really going to have on local connectivity, particularly in the northeast, as well as direct connectivity across the Pennines as well. So from a TFN point of view, we absolutely feel your pain and we are listening as well. What are we looking to do? So we will be providing a strong response back to the department on the proposals. We will be working with affected areas to help shape a coordinated response, which we'll be putting back to the department as well as the operators. We've also set up a collaboration as well with the DFT, and that's really to look at how services can be developed in the northeast and across the east side of the Pennines to improve connectivity that has been affected. And we're also looking at a roadmap, really looking for the future with the industry, for what that future starts to look like, the steps to getting those services back and also enhancing for a future MPR state as well. So firstly, I'd probably say I'd strongly recommend member areas respond to that consultation, provide any representations for their individual regions, as well as obviously inputting into the strategic consultation response that we will put back. And I'll I'll probably stop there as well, and I'll open for any questions and comments. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much for that, Sal. I know there'll be lots of contributions, and I'm going to turn to Jamie first because Jamie's indicating.
Thank you very much, Liam. Thanks, Sal. I like LNER and I like more trains to London, but not at the expense of what's going to happen as a result of these proposals. For the fact that this meeting, I think, is only scheduled for 2 hours, I'm not going to go through all of the services we're going to lose because it would take more than that. But there's an excellent response by SENRUG, the South East Northumberland Rail Users Group. We're going to lose connectivity to Morpeth, a key town in the area I represent. The number of trains that are going to stop in Berwick are going to be reduced. And it's worth remembering that people have moved there and frequently developed their careers there on the basis that these rail services exist. And consequently, they're going to be buying cars. In some cases, they might not afford it, but that's the exact opposite of where we need to get to with our rail system. And why is this happening? It's happening because 8 years ago, somebody made a decision that we would offer firm rights to what was at the time Virgin Trains East Coast, now LNER. Virgin don't even exist anymore, as on the contingency that the infrastructure was going to improve, and those infrastructure improvements haven't happened. And so the argument for doing this is because the business cases were made that it would reduce journey times to London when they bought the Azuma fleet. And so we're now in a situation where we are pushing through an irrational decision based on a criteria in a green book that has been changed, on the assumption that improvements in infrastructure are going to happen that haven't happened. That's going to lead to reduced connectivity, not only within our region, but across the whole of the north. And yet again, this is coming down to running an economy in a London-centric way for connectivity to London, where we already have good connectivity, to destroy connectivity across the north and between the northern cities. And I don't think I'm the only person who thinks they're living in a Kafka novel, where we have this strange conflation of rules have led us to this situation that everybody thinks is a bad situation. And the role of politicians in these times is to clear these log jams and to say, look, the rules may have got us here, but the rules are wrong. They've produced an unintended consequence. So I'd like to put forward a little proposal that the timetable changes are put on hold, that a task force set up by the DFT, but led by someone independent, that the task force examines the constraints, puts forward options to resolve them, both short-term and long-term, works out the best optimal solution, not based on decisions made 8 years ago, but on what will work now, and then puts forward a plan to introduce the timetable changes slowly, aligned to growth in capacity.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Jamie. I think that's a very, very practicable and suitable solution that I'm more than happy to support. And let's get the view of other members. And I know kind of Susan's indicating. So, Susan.
Yes, thank you. And I'd support that too, because I think we just need to understand more about what's driving this. I mean, since this paper came out, so it's come to light that, of course, Bradford is going to be affected by these proposals as well. And going back to the franchising agreement that Mayor Driscoll talked about, Bradford was promised about six trains a day, I believe, to London at one point, and now we're not actually getting there, but we're going backwards. So I do believe there's some investments that are needed to make sure that those commitments can be kept within the future. And are we aware of what those are and where they are in the DFT pipeline? Because obviously if we are, then we all need to get behind those to make sure they're completed, so that Bradford, a city of 537,000 people, can be properly connected to the capital city. I also think, of course, we shouldn't be talking here about, is it a choice between east, west, north, south? You know, we've said before, again and again, that actually we need both to give us good economic sustainability in the future. And it just highlights the reasons why we need that investment in Northern Powerhouse Rail and in HS2. So I'd leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and agree with all of those points as well, Susan. Is anyone else want to come in on this? Because I certainly will do very shortly. But Dan, I'll bring you in now.
Thank you. Just very briefly, to completely agree with what Susan said and Jamie before, I think he's brought forward a really sort of sensible proposal, and certainly I'd be very happy to support it.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Dan. Well, I'll just sort of give my view from the west of the Pennines, if you like, on all of this as well. That I'm very conscious that the East Coast mainline consultation does directly affect people in the northeast and Yorkshire, but actually it affects all of the north of England. One of the things that we're bitterly disappointed about here, not just in Liverpool, but actually everyone west of Manchester, is losing our direct connection to Edinburgh. We campaigned long and hard to actually have that connection to Scotland's capital, and it's pretty galling to see that being taken away from us on the basis of what everyone said is a north-south choice trumping an east-west choice. And the bit I find really frustrating with all of this as well is that we put a lot of effort in to challenging and changing the Treasury Green Book rules that for decades had skewed investment towards London and the southeast. We've done all that heavy lifting to change what the manual is meant to say, yet when we feed all the information into the computer still says no. And my great frustration, and I'll put it as a suspicion here, is actually this isn't about connections from the north down to London. I'm very concerned that actually this is all about putting a little bit more capacity south of Peterborough to support commuting journeys into London. That doesn't mean that's not a priority for that other part of the country, but actually that shouldn't be seen as the priority when these decisions are being taken, when actually it is going to put us back. This ain't levelling up, it's levelling down at the end of the day. So I strongly support what Jamie's proposed, and I hope we can all agree that and move it forward. But I can see David is indicating. So David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things I can add in response, really. I think first thing just to highlight is the East Coast Mainline proposals, I guess, are a kind of a bit of a test for the white paper that came out recently, in that they need joining up with a single guiding mind, which is the different consultations from the various operators, which we tried to summarise in the paper. But it needs an overall guiding mind, and if we can provide some of that, that would be very, very beneficial, I think. Obviously, we don't have the realm of partnership looks at the northern and the TPE aspects of this, but the LNER element is very much a central government DFT led operation. So I think one of the things we can do, if members agree that the course of action set out is not wait until the consultation, but to make this proposal straight away to the department. I think from TFN's point of view, there are a lot of parallels here with the Manchester work, which we've also got on the agenda, and clearly we've got a task force on that. We've got we might not be yet quite where we absolutely need to be on that, but we've got a mechanism for dealing with it. And I think the proposal here sort of suggests that there should be something very similar. And I think there are a lot of parallels, because the Manchester work clearly involves a roadmap on infrastructure, and I think it was touched on by a couple of members. But fundamentally, at the heart of this is there's a lack of paths on the East Coast Main Line because of the infrastructure for all the services that are needed either now or in the future. So to answer the question from what I've seen, there are plans for the East Coast Main Line north of York that would deliver in the short term additional paths that would allow these services to be restored and expanded. They're under development at the moment, but what they need is bringing to a head with a clear roadmap, and obviously clear funding commitment behind them as well. And that would be, I think, a core part of the work on the task force. I think specifically on Councillor Hinchcliffe's point, there are also some proposals around facilitating that Bradford increase. Again, they're in the rail network enhancements pipeline. They are under development, but again, they're critical to understanding what the future is. So I think quite rightly we'd want to see how those are going to be brought forward. So I think the proposal would allow all of those things to be brought together, and TFN would be absolutely happy to support that in terms of providing evidence and analysis and all the work we've done on the new business cases and the new Green Brook approach that I think could really help in demonstrating how important that east-west connectivity is, as well as the north-south connectivity. So, yeah, happy to support that from a technical point of view, from an officer point of view, and implement it if you agree it.
Excellent, thanks for that, David. I think that's all very helpful suggestions to incorporate as well. I'm not seeing any other indications, so I'm going to sort of propose that we accept Jamie's recommendation and proposal there, and I'm not seeing any kind of dissent, so I'm going to take that as a unanimous agreement for that as a proposal and for that report accordingly. Okay, so if we want to move on then to item 5, which is rail reform matters, and I think, David, you're going to give us a brief update on this paper.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the white paper, as everybody will know, was published at the end of May. The TFN board did consider that in some detail in a paper on the 9th of June. So the report you've got here is committee, because it's the first committee discussion since the paper was published, has set out the key elements of the white paper, but it's also incorporated the discussion you had at the board meeting, or many of you did, and the actions that were proposed to be implemented after the board meeting. So the summary just really highlights how big a shake-up this is. I think it's important to underline that. It's the biggest change in 25 years since privatisation and franchising was started. Obviously, it sweeps away the franchises, brings together track and train into a new guiding mind, Great British Railways. So TFN has welcomed many aspects of it because it actually delivers many of the things we've been calling for since the problems with the May 18 disastrous timetable implementation, and some of the issues that came to light there in terms of the fragmentation and lack of joining up between track and train, and lack of a guiding mind to make that call on timetable changes. So there's many things in it that we can and have welcomed. The board obviously discussed the risks and opportunities really for us as well. And I think on the risks side, just to highlight our role and your role as committee and the Rail North Partnership is not clearly defined at this stage. So in particular, it doesn't mention the role of strategic transport bodies such as TFN specifically. And the accountability, of course, in the white paper sits with the new organisation, Great British Railways, where obviously what we have been seeking through things like the Blake Jones review is much more local accountability. And the other side of it is the new organisation will be built on the existing Network Rail regions. And as we've had a long-standing view that those two regions across the north don't necessarily fit or serve our geography that well. So that sort of perpetuates that, although there is reference to perhaps post-Northern Powerhouse Rail that could be looked at, but I think it's something that we would want to see revisited much earlier, so we have an actual clear interface with the new body that works across the whole of the north. I think the opportunities are really around us building on the partnership we had. So there's Appendix 2 that's attached, which wasn't with the board report, but is more information really. It's our initial response to the Secretary of State on the white paper, and it's really setting out what we can offer as TFN and TFN members in terms of building that stronger partnership and making sure that it delivers, as I think is the intention of the white paper, for local communities right across the north. So we set out our capabilities in that letter, planning at a pan-northern level, focus on east-west, which we've just been talking about in terms of the East Coast mainline consultation, but also NPR obviously focuses on that east-west connectivity and really what we can bring to bear in terms of evidence analysis and local needs, which is, I guess, what this committee and members of the committee are all about, putting local needs and passengers first. So we really emphasise that, as well as some of the good work we have done, the statements and achievements we made on the back of the May 18 problems, very clear, decisive action we took and you took, and the local collaboration we've done on the back of COVID work as well, I think are all real strengths that we hope will be heard and built on. So we set out our response. We've had some positive responses back from the department yet. We haven't yet seen the programme for development of the new organisation and how that's going to be constructed. But what we are saying is we want to actually be part of that, a part of the industry bodies that work to deliver that. So we've set out in section 4 the actions that were agreed by the board, including a role in setting up the new organisation, and also highlighting the point that was made at the board about there's some opportunities here in the north for early devolution, stations being one of those that was specifically mentioned at the board meeting, which we will pursue on your behalf as well. So the paper asks committee to note the progress we're making, and that we are going to seek clarity and continue to seek clarity on our future role, how we can build on it, and also for the committee to note that we are about to commission some detailed work, some evidence-based work on the case for change, what the new structure and organisation could look like in the north that would really draw in the best of the white paper proposals and the best of what the north can bring through yourselves and your authorities as well. So that work is about to kick off. We'll bring that back to committee in outline terms, and the idea is that we will bring back a full proposal to the TFN board when it meets at the end of September. So that's all I want to say, Chair, and obviously happy for questions, comments.
Yeah, thanks ever so much for that, David. I've got Andy and Susan. So Andy, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, thanks Liam, and thanks David. Morning, everybody. I think this is tremendously important, David. I think we've got to quickly articulate what a new sort of governance stroke political architecture looks like for rail in the north of England, and not wait for it to be done to us. I'm encouraged, obviously, by a lot of what's in the white paper, the way Keith Williams was talking at NTAC the other day, but I still think there's a tension here that we've got to be honest about, where, you know, at national level, I'm not sure, you know, TFN is as supported as we would want it to be, if I could put it that way. But I'm absolutely determined to keep TFN in one form or another, Liam, for the reasons you were giving when I joined the call, which is, left to its own devices, the rail industry's focus drifts away from the north of England. I mean, that's just basically what happens time and time again. So we could say, you know, we could hold up May 2018 as a prime example of that. But actually, you can go, you know, the failure to sort infrastructure over a long period of time is an example of that. The failed consultation on the recent timetable options is another example of that. That just focus isn't here. And consequently, they keep coming up with half solutions to us. So I don't think we can accept a national guiding mind in which there is no clear voice for the north of England, because that is dangerous for us. You know, the history tells us that we will get neglected in that arrangement. So I think this is becoming clear to me I am becoming clearer, I think, how I feel we should to develop this. But obviously I put it out there just to see whether other board members feel the same. So the new geography, David, has got to be based on combined authorities first and foremost, in that Network Rail's regions don't make any sense to anybody other than Network Rail. And they've got to go, because if railway is going to become more focused on place and the wider agenda that's going on in places through devolution, then it's got to kind of understand that the first building blocks of this are city region economies, aren't they, basically? And that map is growing, with West Yorkshire now fully coming through, and hopefully, you know, more and more places in the north of England will get the same. You know, we will be the entities, hopefully, that will take on the stations firstly, but then have a role with regard to services, and therefore, you know, we are a kind of a part. We have to be that sort of you know, in some ways, you know, working with the guiding mind, if you like, or tasked by the guiding mind, or held to account by the guiding mind, however that gets constructed. So that, I think, is part of the architecture. But then I would want to see a strong TFN over the top of that, knitting us all together, and, you know, making sure that we're working together, resolving disputes, but possibly between us, that might happen from time to time when we move, you know, more towards a city region focus. So TFN becomes the arbiter of the whole of the jigsaw of the north, as well as being the voice of the north back to the national guiding mind. And I'm probably not, you know, I'm encouraged to see a few nods as I'm speaking. I mean, I'm not saying I've got this perfectly right, Liam, but for me it feels something like that. In many ways, TfN becomes the bit that the national guiding mind has to go to before it makes any decision. You can see how this might work. So that's where I think we should quickly develop our proposals and not wait. Actually, get them developed, and then all of us coalesce around them, so that we're not done to later in the year. Hope that makes sense. Thanks, Jeff.
It certainly does, Andy, and I think kind of that articulates what most of us are strongly feeling in all of this. Susan, do you want to come in?
Yes, I was going to say similar, really. That TfN is now quite a mature organisation. How long have we been going now? For a number of years, and therefore we should really be in a position to be able to say how this can work for all of the North, and put our own proposals together, and not wait for something to come out of government and then provide a reaction to that. We should be mature enough to work with government, say, look, we think this is how it could work. I think there's also probably something for TfN to do in terms of making sure, talking to Midlands Engine and all those other regional bodies to make sure that the model you're coming up with works for other parts of the country as well. And then, we can go with a proposal to government which actually they can just plug and play all across the nation. And I think, again, that shows the maturity of our organisation that we're able to do that. So I'd welcome speedy work on this. To make sure that TfN, if we didn't have TfN, we'd have to invent it now, wouldn't we? So this is when you come into your own, and therefore let's show that we can step up to it and take responsibility and initiative.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Susan. Jamie.
Thanks, Liam. Just to echo Andy's points, that national guiding mind has given us HS2 starting at London, working north, when everybody knows the business case. If it had started in Edinburgh and worked south, it would have been better for the entire country, but that's not the way it happened. And we have an East Coast main line that's got capacity constraints such that our earlier discussion shows that if we want an extra train to London, it means we can't get trains to Liverpool and Manchester. It's crazy. So the only way that's going to change is if we have a strong voice for the north with the analytical capacity to back it up. Because it's no good just us shouting, we want more services for the north, if we can't produce the detailed proposals that would do it. So yes, absolutely do that. And of course, it should be on the city region basis.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Jamie. Tim, do you want to come in, and I'll say a few words myself?
Thank you very much, Chair. So we do have the analytical capacity. We also have the interactive train service plans working right the way through for the north of England over the next few years. The big issue ultimately for me is that HS2 is gobbling our cash up. We don't know what the end state number is going to be, but very clearly we are the shock absorber up here in the north. And the quicker the government publish the integrated rail plan, the quicker we will understand whether or not they've gone with the members' preferred network. That is for NPR. In terms of moving train paths around at the moment, well, clearly the government feel that the LNER service, the additional one, would be a higher revenue than what we have currently at the moment, which is cutting out the TPE service going across the north of England, east to west. That is absolutely not correct. What we should be doing is totally supporting continuing on with that TPE service. That is absolutely key for that connectivity all the way up through the northeast from the west. So we continue to push really hard to get that integrated rail plan out, because until we have that, we do not understand where the government is going. We cannot glue the integration piece together and therefore the timetables together. And we have a series of priorities that need to be sorted out. So that's where we are currently at the moment, Liam. We have all the tools in the box. We have your support, and that's really helpful. And we continue to push government, not in a lobbying way, but just push government to get that IRP out. We do not see the vision of the government otherwise, and therefore I would not advocate that May 22 timetable change for the LNER service to appear. We've done the same process with the other service changes that they wanted through Manchester, and we've now, through your help, managed to move that to December currently at the moment. But I would not advocate any timetable changes until we are very, very clear as to what all the moving parts mean. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tim. I think that nicely kind of deals with what we were dealing with previously on the East Coast Main Line as well. But I've seen Susan's hand's gone up. I assume it's in relation to something Tim's just said. So do you want to come in, Susan?
So I can't let any reference of the IRP go past without mentioning it at the moment, of course, because there is concern about what's going to be in the IRP, particularly from a Bradford point of view, with press that's come out over the weekend in the Sunday Express. Just, you know, I'm grateful for TfN support, but obviously TfN board have been quite clear that having a new line complete between Manchester, Bradford Central and Leeds is the preferred and desired route, and I know everybody's backing that, so thank you for that. We do continue to press government to release that so we can fully know their intent and see that hopefully they agree with the northern constituencies and northern leaders that is the right thing to do for the whole of the north. So sorry, Liam, I couldn't let that reference go past. So apologies for just disrupting your agenda there. Thank you.
Not a problem in the slightest, Susan. I'm happy to kind of give our 100% sororial support to everything you've said there, but you would also expect me to equally sort of recognise that we've got the full board support for a brand new line between Liverpool and Manchester as well. Actually, we need brand new infrastructure going all the way from Liverpool all the way across to Leeds as part of this. And woe betide any government that comes back with an IRP that doesn't reflect that transformational infrastructure that we need to see across the whole of the north. So more than happy to kind of echo and amplify everything you've just said there. I think in terms of just getting back to the rail reform matters, just to sort of tie this report up, I agree with everything that has been said. I think it's really important, as Andy said, that we move at real pace here, because if we're not careful, we will be done to, rather than being at the forefront of the reforms. And whilst there are some good things in there, you know, I welcome a national guide in mind. I think if we'd had a national guide in mind, we probably wouldn't have had the disaster we had in May 18, for example. I do think it's absolutely vital that national guide in mind shouldn't be based in London. I think there's a very strong argument that GB Railways should be based in the north of England as part of a kind of inward investment proposition for one of the towns and cities up here. But one of my great concerns, echoing everything that others have said, is that it's not clear where devolution fits within the white paper. Yes, there are acknowledgements about the devolved settlements in Merseyside and in Tyne and Wear, and that's good, but I think all of us across the north want to go further within all of that. Actually, I think we'd all agree that having what is currently now Northern and Transpennine Express effectively being run from London would be completely and utterly unacceptable. And by the same token, something that is based on Network Rail's existing geography of arterial routes emanating in and out of London inevitably will mean that kind of it's that traffic, both passenger and freight, at the southern end of the route that will get undue attention over and above actually what's more important when you look at rail movements in the north of England about the things within our region, particularly those east-west movements. So I strongly believe that the geography needs to be changed within all of this. But equally, as Andy's said, naturally there needs to be that kind of provision for double devolution in all of this, where kind of each of the localities of the north, particularly the combined authority city regions, but also those county areas, can take a much greater involvement, influence and control of some of the kind of locally important services to their areas. So all of that needs to be kind of within our response, and that engagement with government needs to kind of happen quickly. The other point I'd also make, because this is something that I care very passionately about, is that there is an underlying issue with the white paper about driving costs out of the industry, and I think we all want the industry to be more efficient and more effective. We wouldn't argue against that, but I get deeply disappointed when the rolling stock leasing companies are effectively being left untouched within all of this. It's something that I care passionately about, because when we've bought brand new trains over here in the Liverpool City region, we've gone nowhere near the privatised leasing companies, because I call them the loan sharks of the industry. I don't mean that offensively, I mean that exactingly. It's a really expensive way of providing brand new trains that actually that should be challenged and done completely differently. So I think part of our work needs to show that, because it's something that we've done differently in the Liverpool City region. I know Jamie's team up in the northeast are doing something similar. And there's a great example of how the North can actually give a solution to the whole of the country that uses public money much better than it has been done for 30 years in the provision of trains. So I would kind of put all those points on the table, but I know Andy wants to come back in as well.
Sorry, Liam, I really don't want to prolong it, but it was just something you said, and I think it's really just important to make this point before we leave this discussion. I don't want what I said to look like it's all about, you know, mayoral combined authorities and we're the, you know, and it's all about a thing that works for us. I think it's really important to say that TfN is critical in a world where other parts of the North don't yet have devolution, and TfN, I think, is critical to act for those areas in advance of the devolution map being completed. And you know, I think this has got to work for everybody. I think it would be a very dangerous world for those areas if our role as mayoral combined authorities was recognised by the national guiding mind, but the areas out neighbouring to us that don't have a mayoral combined authority devolution, you know, it'd be a very risky place for them to find themselves if there was no TfN. So I just think it's really important, obviously, to say that this is in the interest of everywhere in the North, and we all agree this. You know, whether we're in a mayoral combined authority or we're not in a mayoral combined authority, we all have, you know, a belief that we both have to have that deep devolution, but with that TfN umbrella, if you like, protecting all of us. So I just thought it was just worth, you kind of touched on it, you know, the county areas. I just thought it was worth making that point. But no, it's a really good discussion. I think we're all in the same place, aren't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thanks ever so much for that, Andy. Okay, so I think that's very clear, David and Martin and Tim and the team, where we need to crack on with that very quickly, and we look forward to that work coming back to us accordingly. Okay, yeah, if we move on to, oh, sorry, David.
No, just agreeing, Chair, we will move that on very, very quickly. I think we know we've done a lot of work on what that model is. We can articulate that very quickly, and then we'll bring the evidence alongside that and the case for change as well. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much. Okay, let's move on to item 6, which is the Rail North Partnership update report that encompasses a number of different things. And I know we've got 3 people that are going to speak. So we've got Gary Bogan first, who's one of the Rail North Partnership directors, who's going to introduce the report. And I know we've also got Rob and Caroline from Northern, who are going to give a brief update on some Northern issues. And also as well, we've got Matthew Galton, the new Managing Director of Transpennine Express, who will briefly touch on TP's Direct Award. So, Gary, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Happily, Liam. You'll imagine coming from a place where I too am really interested to know where the 2 real contractors will be managed from in the future, and so likewise we'll be intrigued to see how that plays out. In terms of what the partnership and the talks have been looking to do this last period, I won't repeat what's in the report, but maybe worth pulling out that some of the big areas that have absorbed a lot of energy are indeed Manchester Recovery Task Force and East Coast Main Line, as we look to finalise what the propositions are there in order to get people able to give their final comments. Also worth noting that I think since we last met, work has started in earnest trackside and the Transpennine route upgrade, and so we're starting to have to work with the operators to make sure that they have everything that they need to enable them to keep passengers moving during that. There's some material in the paper on the fleet availability issues that surfaced here in the north are akin to what you'll have seen experienced in the southwest. Really noteworthy that, particularly with respect to Northern, they have been able with their suppliers to get on top of that really very quickly, so that and Rob can explain more if needs be, but that issue feels well in hand. And similarly, TP I know have worked through First Group and beyond to ensure that they have the kind of watching brief around that issue for them that they're going to need to keep the Novas moving. This is now the beginning of the business planning review cycle. We've got our first quarterly review of the new form business plans going on, and that will include work that will lead to the replacement of the service agreement that we have just now with Northern by March of next year, and also and you'll hear from Matthew later on the commencement of the TPE DA, which we'll see quite a lot of early product delivered that helps us to shape out the future of the operation there. And also the comprehensive spending review is now beginning for us. That's what will set our budget for the next 3 years, and where we'll look to capture, working with yourselves, what the aspirations likewise are of the operators and for the operations in the north, so that we can look to secure that from Treasury in due course. The other area that we're now looking to kick off in some force, as it were, is the beginning of the transformation of the two operators that we'll need to see to enable them to become carbon or to move across from reliance on diesel and decarbonise the network in the industry in the north, if we're to meet what for us is a very challenging timetable, and that alongside other initiatives on the network that are intended to make it work more efficiently, like basically electronic signalling in cab, will mean that we've got a lot to do in terms of making the case and the argument for new rolling stock fleets or improvements, certainly in the fleets that we have. And so that, again, will bring to yourselves in due course, but that's really quite exciting, because that will that would see the completion really of the transformation that we started with in the two franchises back in 2016, albeit not inside those franchises, but through close working with both the operators and the industry. I have to say that we're starting to see quite a lot of the type of interworking that the guiding mind calls for, and that GBR would look for. And so actually I think there's the opportunity for us to be quite innovative in that space in the north, because of the close connection between our two operators and the two network regions. But in the short run for us, and I know that Rob and Carolyn will come to speak about that, all of the focus is on the fact that we're seeing a strong demand return in the north, in respect of Northern, certainly well ahead of other commuter railways across parts of the rest of the UK, which obviously brings with it issues. Whilst it's welcome in terms of patronage and revenue, it also brings the issues of how we operate in with rising demand levels at the same time as we still have expectations and requirements around about social distancing, and how we support the reopening of the economy at the same time as we keep the passengers comfortable that what we're providing them is what they would expect in the hopefully tail end of these COVID times. So that's been a great deal of the focus, I know, for the operational railway in the last 3 months or so. I won't say much more about that, I think, because I'm not the expert. I'd probably, Liam, if you're happy, would invite Rob and Carolyn perhaps to come in at this point, and then Matthew likewise afterwards to give us some material on the TPE DA and the exciting stuff that's happening there. I don't know if anyone has any questions in the meantime on my element, and if not, I'll probably hand over to Rob.
Brilliant, thanks, Gary. I think it's probably best if we have all the kind of the kind of contributions at this stage, and then we bring the sort of questions in. So, Rob, do you want to do your bit on Northern, and then Matthew can do his bit on TPE, and then we can have questions and comments.
Thank you, Chair. So I think Gary's said most of what the highlights were in the last month. So thank you, Gary. The new timetable obviously came in May and has settled down quite nicely. We did have quite a difficult first week or so, because as you know, we've got about 25 of our brand new trains were laid up with the yaw damper issues. Pleasingly, we've now got 24 out of those 25 trains back in service, so we do have the full rolling stock fleet available to operate the main timetable. So as Gary said, seen some significant increases in passenger numbers, particularly over the May bank holiday week, which goes to show that there is a strong demand for leisure travel, and we've seen that strong demand fall off a little bit, but still stay strong. We're not really quite seeing the morning peak commute coming back strongly, but with people being asked to continue to work from home, that is understandable. But we will be certainly looking forward to trying to understand where the market is likely to go. If possibly our market migrates more to being later in the day. We always used to have the key focus between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, moving all those hundreds of thousands of people every year. That isn't quite the focus at the moment. It's later in the afternoon where we see the bigger passenger numbers. So it'll be quite important that we keep close to how we possibly have to change
where our capacity delivery is focused in the future. As Gary said, we are starting to look. We've got a team of people looking now at the rolling stock strategy for Northern, considering the significant decarbonisation agenda that we face. The vast majority of our fleet will be approaching 35 to 40 years old by the time we get to the middle part of this decade. So how do we replace that in a railway that doesn't have that many wires above it? Only 25% of our network is electrified. So to move away from diesel is going to be quite a challenge, and hence we're still developing quite innovative ideas around hydrogen and battery, and working with Network Rail to optimise a potential rolling programme of electrification. Just looking forward, we've been working with Officer Reference Group for December timetable. We will be looking at changing services in December to balance the demand with the resource constraints we still have. We've still got quite a lot of drivers to train to get us back to where we need to be, and so we'll be bidding for the December timetable shortly, and working with some feedback from your officers. I'll leave it there for any questions.
Thanks for that, Rob. Matthew, do you want to go next, and then we'll take all the questions and comments collectively?
Yes, thank you very much. So good morning. I'm Matthew Galton, the new MD at TPE. Delighted to join you. Clearly your committee's got a key role in the oversight and development of railways in the north of England, and I look forward to working with you really closely. So as Gary said, we have a new national rail contract for TPE that started on the 30th of May, which it was my privilege to lead our negotiations with the DfT and Rail North Partnership for. It's an important contract in the sense that it really does give us a renewed focus about how we serve you. I'd like to talk a bit about performance first. I think it's been a key topic over recent years. I'm pleased that TPE's performance is steadily improving. The last 4-week reporting period, which ends this Sunday, indeed we're at 94.8%. We're just tucked in behind Mersey Rail and London Overground, which is a good place to be, and building on a plus 94% score in the previous period. In this new contract, we've got a new focus on performance, new measures, particularly measuring on-time calls at every station, not just the end destination, set around being on time or within 3 minutes of the scheduled arrival time at every station we call at. So that's where our focus is shifting to. And if we don't meet those targets, I'm going to be open and transparent with you as to why we aren't getting there, but we've started very well. So the new contract is an exciting opportunity to build a stronger, more customer responsive railway for the north of England and Scotland. One of the focuses, building on work that TfN and yourselves have been doing, is going to be looking at how we improve connectivity across the north of England and into Scotland to make sure that we're playing our part as part of that post-pandemic recovery, and critically getting the sort of investment that we need into the north of England's railways. So one thing that we have started as part of our new contract is looking at how we expand TPE's network of intercity and interurban services. We're going to be doing a piece of work with stakeholders this summer on that. We're really looking to see how we can improve the number of folk that we're serving and the frequency by which we serve them. It's a really important part of keeping the railway relevant and wanted. My background before I joined TPE was predominantly with Great Western Railway, and what we found there is we get a coalition of the willing together, making the right arguments with sound business cases, which I did personally in Devon and Cornwall, then we can get serious amounts of money into the railway. So I'm very much looking forward to shouldering arms with you under this new contract, and my personal involvement with that in getting that coalition of the willing together and really driving forward and getting the sorts of investment that we need in the north for a continually growing railway. My personal commitment to you is that we'll be an even stronger, TP will be even stronger partner for you than it's been before. and that we will work really, really hard with you on shared aspirations. So I hope that's a helpful introduction to me and to the new contract and my personal philosophy, indeed that of my senior team, and that's what we're going to do working with you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Matthew. And I think we're all really looking forward to working with you in the months and years ahead. Dan, you're indicating, so over to you.
Thanks very much, Liam, and thanks to everybody for those reports. My question is for Gary. Gary, I note that we've been provided with updates for all of the operators except East Midlands Railways. Although obviously I appreciate that Rail North doesn't have the same contractual relationship with East Midlands as they do with Northern and TPE. As you'll note, there is an overlap, as you briefly touched on in your report, with the issues that they're having with rolling stock. However, I understand that East Midland Railway's problems extend beyond rolling stock, and we were informed last week that these issues extend to complex operational issues, high levels of staff sickness and strike action on Sundays, which look to continue until the end of August. The overall impact of this will be that from last Sunday, East Midlands Railways have reduced the timetable they introduced back in May to 75% of the total services, and this looks as if it will continue until December. So can I ask that where there are direct implications and impact on other operators, such as the delayed rolling stock being cascaded to Northern, can I ask you what's being done by Rail North and TfN to work with and engage with East Midlands Railways to resolve these issues? And who's responsible for pushing for timescales for these issues to be resolved? Thanks, Liam.
Thanks, Dan. Gary?
Yeah, so we work closely with what I would be known as inside the department as a market lead, and there's a market lead for East and West Midlands who is a member of the Rail North Partnership Board as a Department for Transport representative. So we have been working closely with him, particularly in respect of the cascade to Northern, because it's actually a two-stage cascade. It's West Midlands to East, then East Midlands on to Northern, and looking at how quickly those issues are likely to resolve themselves. And I know, Rob, that you have spoken likewise with East and West Midlands on this. It's difficult. The cascade element is really difficult. I think that we are going to need to look at all of the options there. At the moment, we've got derogations available for rolling stock, which otherwise should be retired if it's not going to be fitted for accessibility. And I understand actually that accessibility issues aren't huge, but they're quite difficult to overcome. And so we do speak very closely to that market lead, to the East Coast, East Midlands and West Midlands talks. And I can look down to pull out the dates and times that we do have. But I think it's fair to say, Rob, we don't have anything cast iron as yet that we're still looking at the dealing with, rather than the getting past in respect of the cascade issues.
Correct, Gary. We don't have any definitive dates, and we're now looking at potential mitigations to put in place at the end of this year to keep going, because the 153s at the moment only have derogation until December.
Okay, thanks for that, gents. Susan?
Thank you. I mean, I suppose I'm just contemplating really the last year or even two has changed everything, hasn't it? And in your businesses, that will have had a major impact on how you operate and how you think about investing. And I just, obviously we talked about there's business planning in the paper, and it is important that we at TfN are really involved in that and cited on what's happening with that, because is that going to change? As the last 18 months, I suppose, changed your short-term, medium-term, long-term and business planning? Are you not going to invest as much? And I suppose the second part of it really is we started this meeting by talking about changes in services which were promised to us by operators and now are not going to be delivered, and therefore we need to be cited early on really in the business planning if that's going to impact on services, and whether we need to lobby therefore to get investment into track changes, etc., so you can deliver the agreements that you're proposing. So I suppose it's a plea really to make sure that business planning is open and transparent, and also you let us know now if there's things that you think that you were proposing before the pandemic, which you're now not going to be able to do.
I think that's an excellent point, Susan. And one of the things I was going to ask is exactly on that kind of aspect about how will the business planning process effectively report into the committee to seek our endorsement in each of the kind of stages as it goes along. I can see Matthew's indicating, so Matthew, do you want to come back first? But I'm sure in a wider sense, Gary and David will probably want to respond as well.
Oops. Liam?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Two buttons to press. Apologies for that. So I don't think Councillor is at all wrong in asking a question about how we're responding to the pandemic. I think it's our responsibility as the rail industry to take a long-term view, irrespective of contract length and so on. I think that's healthy. I've worked with Rob for over 10 years in various guises. I know he takes that view as well. And that's what we need to do. But critically, you know, it's a fundamental tenet for me that what we do has to be rooted in the needs of the communities that we serve. As I've said earlier in the meeting, certainly TPE, our philosophy now is, and our action is to look for a long-term plan in terms of what's appropriate. But that needs to be informed by your needs, and then in turn we articulate those arguments to those who have a bearing on the amount of money that we can spend and bring to bear. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Matthew. David, are you coming back as well?
Yeah, really just to reassure the committee, we have agreed on the business planning process that this new process under the new contracts, we will have input, you will have input at 3 stages. The first of that would be sort of initial ideas and things you'd like to see. We'll gather that over the next couple of months before that's fed in more formally through Gary. And then I think there is, as a reminder, there's a sort of final stage where we work with DfT on the budget available and the priorities that we would need to agree based on the budget before the business plan comes into play at the start of the next financial year. So yes, you should be seeing much more involvement on that going forward. The other point is, I think in terms of there's much less of things being done to us now because we're not on as we move out of franchises, there's a real opportunity, and we've been talking to Rob and colleagues and also Matthew about things we can do with the operators to develop services and actually to, you know, realign resources, as Rob mentioned. So I think we'll have some really interesting discussions starting with your lead officers, but also then with you as committee members over the next few months about reshaping things. And this is about actually getting more out of the money and subsidies going into the north and delivering more for you and communities, whether that's tackling leisure markets because they're where the growth is. I think it's really exciting opportunities for us to shape things and not wait for it to be sort of done to us and presented on a plate. It's probably very much in line with the white paper as well. We've got the mechanisms, we've got the evidence to do that in the north on your behalf.
Thanks, David. Rob, and then Gary.
So I just want to reassure Councillor Hinchcliffe that the businesses continue to invest. We've authorised significant sums of money, many millions, in stations, in depots. Old Botanic Gardens, one of our smaller depots, is having a significant upgrade to expand capacity. So just in this year, we will continue to invest in all sorts of facilities and staff accommodation, and we'll be working with Gary and David in our business plans for following years to continue that investment. And as I said earlier, I think one of the biggest investments the North needs to make in its railway is that rolling stock programme. We've seen what massive differences can be made by bringing brand new trains into the North. We need to continue with that, but do that under the auspices of trying to really be ahead in delivering a decarbonisation agenda at the same time as a modernisation agenda for the North that we've already embarked upon. So I'd like to just reassure members that investment is still happening today, and we look to do it more in the future.
Thanks, Rob. Gary?
Yeah, I think I was just going to say that it does. Speaking as somebody who managed franchises, I think for 20 years before before COVID came along, the end of the 2 franchises, one already happening because of Northern's move into operator of last resort, but also the move across to direct award for TPE. It changes the most fundamental aspects of how we used to buy our railway services, which is that we effectively entered into a deal that was put in a safe, that said this is what you'll do over the coming few years, and all of the cost and all the revenue risk sits with the operator to do that. And if we want to make changes, we have to go through a very long and convoluted process of warming up a financial model again, and that is just by the wayside effectively now. And what we've got instead is an annual cycle of planning for the year ahead, for the timetable in the year ahead, for the rolling stock that will need to be deployed, the new folks who will need to be hired, and in one sense that's great news for us, because it means that David's quite right, the North gets a much closer and more ongoing say. The really unfortunate thing is that what brought that about is going to be incredibly testing for us in the financial sphere when we see what the spending review looks like. So it's without being dramatic, it's kind of best of times, worst of times thing. It's the best gift for TFN and the Rail North partnership, I think, in terms of in-flight change and improvement that we're going to need, but against a really testing background.
Okay, thanks for that, Gary. That's very useful. I was just going to ask briefly about Boxing Day services. Obviously very pleased that kind of potentially this Boxing Day we'll be seeing a St Helens to Lime Street service operating. I completely appreciate how engineering work is the key determinant for Boxing Day services, but I just think it'd be probably useful for us to get some report on what may be in the mix for 2022 and 2023, because engineering programs are being set now, so we should be able to understand which other parts of the North on future Boxing Days can also expect an appropriate Boxing Day service. So I don't know, Gary, if you want to answer that.
I think, if you don't mind, I'll take that away, Liam, rather than get it wrong. I'll get an update off. I won't need to wait for another committee. I'll get an update circulated in short order on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be absolutely fine. I think that's something everyone would be keen to sort of understand. Okay, if we've dealt with everything on item 6, I think there's no further indications of what I wanted to speak. Let's move on to item 7, which is the Manchester Recovery Task Force update. I know David's going to introduce this, but we've also got Richard George joining us, who's also going to say a few words as well. So, David, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just really wanted to highlight it's very much an update report. It is work in progress. And you had the discussion at the board meeting, some of you back in June. What have we done? We've continued to press the case to get a resolution on the service side and progress on the infrastructure side. I'm pleased to say that we've had some good progress on the service side with hothouse session with the task force. Task force are now very proactively engaged with developing the roadmap that you've asked for. We've seen first version of that, and some further work to do on that, but I'm confident that is progressing in the right way. So that's a really good outcome, and that's looking at not only what the infrastructure would provide in terms of when we can enhance restore services, but also other service changes on other bits of infrastructure that aren't necessarily directly related to Manchester, like electrification elsewhere. So that is progressing. We've also had a very positive meeting with DFT. If you remember from the board meeting, Tim Wood and myself have been talking to DFT about a much stronger collaboration on the infrastructure side. We're working much more closely with DFT, and also working to support the what will be quite a challenging financial case with Treasury. So we've actually done quite a lot of work on the economic case. We've also been doing work with South Yorkshire, looking at the specific economic impacts in the Sheffield City region. So I say that is work in progress. The intention is next month to bring a report on that, and the plan would be to give a direction of travel on what is now December 22 target date. I think that was a positive outcome from the NTAC meeting. You managed to get agreement with the minister there. That would be the earliest date for the change, but we do need to make progress on that. We do need to give the operators who are on the call now certainty and clarity about putting in place the resources. There are no easy options here, as we know, which is why we're also so involved with it. So that's the intention, to arrange a special call for the committee members, caveated on the progress that we are making being complete. But I think probably best to hand over to Richard, who has been engaged in some of the discussions, but just to give a brief update from his point of view. Over to you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Liam. The first thing to say is I haven't come anywhere close to finishing those discussions. There are a number of people I've not been able to get in the diary, and I'm on holiday this week, which doesn't help that process either. So Dan, I've been trying to get to see you. I'm in contact with your office. Mr. Burnham, I've been trying to get hold of Andy as well. I think he's disappeared from the call, but whatever. We're still trying to fix up various meetings. But what I would say is that looking at the position we're in terms of putting the spec together for December 22, it looks awfully like the same problems we faced 2 or 3 years ago. We've still got the same choices that we've got to make in many respects, in terms of we've got to decide what priorities we put on the Castleford corridor. And I'm sorry to keep banging on about the Castleford corridor. It sounds like a broken record talking about the Castleford corridor, but it is at the heart of the specification of how it affects everything else. The one thing I am clear about is that there is no clever timetable fix that's going to give everybody what they want, which does mean that somewhere along the line we're stuck with having to make some compromises, and that's going to be uncomfortable for everybody, not least of which the railway planners, because it's not their job actually to decide on those. It's for the leaders to decide on what those compromises should be. As Matthew eloquently put before, the train planner's job is to put together the timetable that serves the community, not the other way around. So I haven't got to the end of this process at all. I'm fearful that there's no easy fixes. There's no great surprises at the moment, frankly. And we haven't got a guiding mind to wave a wand and decide for us either. So I'll continue having the discussions. And unfortunately, as I've said many times before, I haven't got a magic wand either. And somehow we will have to decide what that specification looks like. And we need to decide that specification pretty soon, because there's an awful lot of work the train planners will need to do in order to have a timetable fit for consultation later on this year. So I will continue my rounds of talking to people, and we'll get to where we get to.
Okay, thanks for that, Richard, and thanks for that very sort of candid update. I think that's very, very useful and helpful. Are there any comments or questions anyone wants to raise at this stage? Dan?
Thank you, Liam. I mean, just to say back to Richard, look, I think you understand the strength of feeling that exists in South Yorkshire about this, specifically around the potential loss of direct connectivity to the airport. I can't think of any other city in the world the size of Sheffield that's had a direct link and then has lost it. So this is a big issue for us. So keen to meet you, the earliest available opportunity to impress upon you the importance of seeking to find a solution. But I accept that there are no quick fixes. But given the impact that this work has right across the north of England, I think it is incredibly important that government gives it the closest possible attention and maybe even brings to bear additional resource. If the government want to level up the country, then this is a very good way of demonstrating their commitment to it. So a really important issue. I'm pleased to hear that some progress is being made, but I remain concerned about the likely impact that this will have on my passengers and my constituents in South Yorkshire. So keen that we work together to find a resolution as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I absolutely understand the concerns of South Yorkshire. I think one of the stark things about the options from MRTF was that for all sorts of reasons and capacity reasons, which I completely and totally understand, none of the options included the South Yorkshire to the airport train. And that's a very stark message that comes out of the options, which is why, yeah, I do need to talk to you and yours. It is a problem that we need to find a solution to, but it's not a capacity. It's not an easy capacity fix, put it that way. So we need to talk. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan and Richard. Any other comments that anyone wants to make at this stage, other than obviously we need to make sure that those conversations happen offline with a number of different people, and crucially move forward to another meeting at some point in the next month.
Can I be clear, Liam? Do we know?
Of course you can.
Do we know when that meeting is likely to be?
I don't think we've had anything organised as of yet, but David, do you want to clarify the latest?
We're doing some diary checks at the moment, and we're looking at targeting it mid-July, which would give time to get in place all the necessary governance pieces before sort of summer holidays, etc. So that is the target. I mean, it is all caveated on the progress that we make, of course, but that's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think also, before we move on, just sort of thank you, Richard, for interrupting your holiday to actually kind of join us today. Genuinely, it's very, very much appreciated. Okay, shall we move on to our final agenda item then, which is business planning and commissioning? And I think sort of David and Jim are going to do a bit of a double act here. So David, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll kick off. I think just the context of this is, I mean, it is essentially for noting and endorsing the kind of next steps. It's not anything like a decision, but we wanted to bring this today because I think in the context of the white paper, it shows the value that both TFN can add and working with you as local authority partners can bring, because essentially we've got a very ambitious long-term rail strategy, 20-year plan that everybody agrees is the right level of ambition for the North. And the question is, how do we make some progress on some of those very important aspects? And the answer is, we've got the tools, we've got the capacity, we've got the knowledge in the North to do that, and that's exactly what we're doing. Now, we can't deliver everything in that 20-year plan in one go, but this paper highlights the progress we're making in 3 key areas. The first of which is stations, and we did secure significant investment in the old Northern TP franchise and stations, and operators have delivered that. But we've got 500 stations and some big gaps in what people see as acceptable standards, be that accessibility or general quality. So, having delivered that through the operators and franchises, we're not sitting back. We're saying, what is the next stage now? What is the minimum standards that we aspire to as the first step? And then obviously we want to go beyond that. So the work we highlight in the report is trying to put an analytical spin on that and use our evidence to say, how can we use the analysis and local knowledge to make the best possible case? So what we want to do is achieve more investment and a bigger share of the national pot, quite simply. And we can do that by bringing in local knowledge, bringing in our evidence. And we set out an approach where we're looking at perhaps taking clusters of stations to increase the attractiveness of the business case and secure more investment. We are suggesting that we do that in 3 ways, and we've looked at accessibility as an example. It does cover every area, but we know accessibility is a key area we're falling behind on, and there's still about 40% stations that don't have what we considered minimum step-free access. We are going to bring a paper on that to the board in July, to TFN board, so there'll be more on that there. But we've used that as a bit of case study and said, actually, we can try and secure some investment through the DfT's national pipeline, the RNet process, by putting together a really strong case for clusters of stations. Secondly, we can work with you directly, local authorities, because stations, after all, are community assets, and what's best in your areas. We'll work with you on strengthening the case and evidence base for the plans you've got for stations and share our methodology on that. And then finally, which is probably the territory of the board report, to really argue the case for a bigger share of the national pot of that accessibility funding, to really make a step change on that and get to a level of at least minimum accessibility across the North, because we are quite a long way behind. So we'll set that out in the board report next month and work with your lead officers to develop that methodology. But Jim is going to talk about 2 other specifics around journey times and reliability, where we've made some really good progress as well.
Okay, firstly with journey times, it's perhaps worth just reminding members, I hope you won't enough to take a minute or 2 to do this, Liam, of just what journey times in the north of England are like. They basically, in many respects, they're unchanged and unimproved for decades. So Leeds to Bradford is 30 miles an hour. It's the end-to-end speed for a service between Leeds and Bradford. It's the same as it was in the early part of the last century, also with 2 station stops. Over 100 years, it hasn't improved. Actually, it was 18 minutes then, it's 20 minutes now. So it's quicker in the early 1900s than it is today. Manchester to Southport is slower than it was in the days of steam trains when I was a kid. And this is writ large across the north, all services all over the place, Manchester to Blackburn, lots and lots and lots of them. As well as not serving the needs of the north very well, it drives operating cost because you get poor utilisation of resources. Thank you for nodding, Matthew. I'm pleased to say that, but it's an important point. There is a win-win situation potentially to be achieved. Getting there it's easier to describe what it would be than to describe how to get there. But a faster service would both meet the need, and lots of lines across the north of England would meet the needs of the north better and help the drive down the operating costs of both franchises because they would be able to make better use of their resources. And we've been doing some work on this. So I'll give the example of the Northumberland line, which is a reopening scheme from Ashington and Blythe into Newcastle. The original plan, that's been being worked on for quite a number of years and has very successfully. I mean, it's going forward. The government has funded it, real success in the last 12 months to achieve its funding approvals and entry into the pipeline and so on. But the original plans involved a slow service in Northumberland, would have required 4 train sets and 4 loads of train crew to operate a train every half an hour. And TfN intervened and said, no, you need to design the infrastructure that you're providing to allow the train sets to get round quickly enough so that you only need 3 of them to operate a service every half hour. And that is the basis, including adequate turnaround times at the ends to ensure that it's reliable. I think Rob's on the call now. Rob made the point very early on, Rob Warnes from Northern, Rob made the point very early on that and absolutely rightly, that you would need adequate turnaround times. We asked Rob what they were, 10 minutes minimum, and that's the basis on which TfN said, right, this must be developed on this basis. And it is being developed on that basis. It's easier when the infrastructure is being upgraded. And what we're looking at, what TfN is looking at, is a programme to address that on all lines across the north. So again, that's easier said than done, but the principle is an important one. I think the delivery plan that's being worked up for this will set out a process for rolling it out across the north of England. Now, it won't be possible. There'll be different potential benefits on different lines. The horses for courses thing. It won't be possible to produce reductions in operating cost on all lines. Probably not even on the majority, but even if you did it only on 1/3 of them or 1/4 of them, that could be significant. On other lines, particularly lines where the service terminates and goes back again, but with short turnaround times, Bishop Auckland, Gloucester Hadfield, Blackpool South, Colne, there's quite a lot of them. If you could speed the trains up so they get to the destination earlier and then can leave later, they have a greater amount of turnaround time, they have more resilience. If they arrive late, they've got a much better chance of departing back on time, and that will be the purpose. So with that in mind, the delivery plan has been drawn up, and one of the other difficulties of this was frankly the process for identifying the works necessary wasn't fit for purpose, basically. And I want to give credit to Network Rail here. That sounds like it's criticism of Network Rail. I want to give credit to them. They have been very open in being willing to develop a new process about this. And we have TfN has spearheaded, in conjunction with Network Rail and with good collaboration from TPE and from Northern, a new process that has gained rail industry recognition. It's been piloted now on 5 lines. And it's identified that it's a couple of minutes journey time improvement that could be achieved between York and Scarborough, basically with the existing infrastructure. It doesn't need investment, it needs a tiny amount of expenditure, things like changing the speed boards and just rechecking the level crossing assessments. Similarly, between Darlington and Bishop Auckland, there are about 4-minute journey time improvement there, and that should achieve a reliability improvement on that service. There are 3 other lines as well that are in the pilot scheme, as I say, we've had very good industry collaboration. We've now submitted a bid to the Rail Network Enhancements Pipeline for funding. Well, we submitted it for 1.5 million, but the provisional allocation has been for 500,000 for assessing, which would allow us to assess about 1/3 of the remaining lines across the north of England. Again, to look at what the existing infrastructure is capable of. And you might wonder, how does that come about? How does the existing infrastructure turn out to be capable of better speed? Frankly, it's a result of the renewals programme that Network Rail has had over the last 10 years. But Network Rail is not, I can see Martin nodding to that, but that's the secret of it. And what TfN has done is spotted that there is an opportunity there to maximise the use of that renewals programme, because at the moment Network Rail is not, it has no responsibility for raising the speed. It just has a responsibility for doing the renewal, not for spotting what journey time opportunity might be achievable as a result of it. Now, as I say, that's not meant in any way as criticism of Network Rail. They take their instructions from the Office of Road and Rail, and that is their instruction. But they have been very open, and I want to stress this point, praising the collaboration we've had from Network Rail about this in developing the new process and being willing to change how they do it, look up for these opportunities. In the first instance, they're being rolled out York to Scarborough and Darlington to Bishop Auckland, but the other 3 lines are Manchester to Clitheroe, Leeds, Bradford, Preston, and Doncaster to Doncaster, Scunthorpe, Grimsby, Cleethorpes. But the programme that we bid for is for assessing a further 22 lines across the north of England. If I can move on to reliability schemes, these are small scale interventions that we are looking at. Perhaps just worth saying, there are already a very clearly defined set of responsibilities about performance. The train operators have their responsibilities. Those are overseen, as you know, through the Rail North Partnership. Network Rail have a set of, and they're about trains and drivers and operating things in the right way. Network Rail has a set of responsibilities about reliability, and that is essentially about maintaining the infrastructure, making sure rails don't break, signals don't fail, trains don't block up, embankments don't fall down, all that sort of stuff. And that is overseen by the Office of Road and Rail. But there is a set of stuff in the middle that up to now has dropped down the crack between that, for whom nobody is responsible, which is identifying where investment in the infrastructure might enable better reliability. Now, we've appointed an officer who's working out the delivery plan for that. He has been in intensive discussions with Network Rail and Northern and TPE. In fact, the list of schemes we've got has come from the train operator, primarily from the train operators, and also secondarily from Network Rail. They've got about 130 proposals, which shows you the scope for this stuff. But we've identified 11 that look like potential quick wins. They're all relatively, the ones that we've identified as quick wins are relatively small scale, should be fairly cheap, fairly cheerful, fairly quick to implement. They are things like level crossing upgrades to allow the trains to run faster over them, provision of some what's called intermediate block signals to allow trains to proceed more quickly after other ones, one in Cumbria, one in the Wharf Valley, one on the Mid-Cheshire line, I think, and those 3 were identified by Northern. They are fairly small scale things like that. They are being worked up and they'll be set out in the delivery plan. I'm hoping that both of these delivery plans need some further work on them to finalise, and they will set out overall how we're going to take this forward. I would hope they will be in a position to bring to you in a month or 2. leave it at that. Sorry, I've taken a little time on that. I've taken advantage, Liam, of the fact that the meeting was running to time, but I hope that's useful and interesting, and I will very happily answer any questions anyone might have.
No, it certainly is, Jim. And look, I'd like to take the opportunity just to sort of praise you and everyone that's been involved, particularly with the line speed improvement work, because that really is industry leading stuff that is. All right, there's no quick wins in the railway, unfortunately, but is some of the, in theory, easier stuff, because it's about kind of looking at how the asset can work and maximising its potential, really. So some excellent stuff there. Before I bring a number of people in for questions and comments, just solely so I don't forget, Caroline has put a question in the chat that pertained to the previous Manchester Recovery Task Force item that Andy wanted to raise, but he had to leave, and it deals with kind of the potential of a calling service for Goulburn and that being dependent upon some electrification to Staley Bridge. Rather than kind of reopen a debate and discussion we've just had, can I ask David to pick that up offline and liaise with Caroline and Andy as a sort of specific answer to that question? I think it's
quite a specific question, so yeah, that's no problem. We'll get another.
Wonderful, and obviously we can appropriately kind of recognise that in the minutes of this meeting accordingly. But I've got Melissa indicating, then Susan. So Melissa, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, Mayor Jarvis had to leave, so just on his behalf. Jim, can you just clarify the same? My understanding is the line speed improvement desktop study has also been done on the Hope Valley line, and that it's already looking like initial good results for potential improvements there. Can you confirm was progress subsequently made to take this now to the next stage? I believe that TfN last week were looking to commission the next stage, which I understand is then the validation stage, which then goes to implementation stage. Can you confirm if that was progressed and what that could mean shortly for the Hope Valley?
Yes, I can confirm that's right. The new process was applied to the Hope Valley and identified the scope for the existing infrastructure to allow up to 4 minutes better, particularly for the TPE trains that are subject to what's called a differential speed limit at the moment. And yes, to your second point, that TfN is intending to commission Network Rail actually just to validate that. So I probably need to explain to members what the validation is. The initial assessment is based on Network Rail's records, and whereas you might think we would be entitled to expect those to be completely accurate, in some respects, they then have to go back and check that what's on the ground does actually correspond with what their records back in the office say. So you have to pay them to do that. So yes, that work is being commissioned. It shouldn't take all that long. It should be report back by the autumn, I would hope, and it will then hopefully confirm how much of this potential journey time improvement might actually be realisable fairly quickly. But I don't want to say more specifically than that because we haven't had those discussions with Network Rail yet about what timescale they might agree to for it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Okay, Susan.
Thank you. Just echo what you said, Liam, about the work there that's been done, and obviously particularly recognise that big fantastic if we could prove that 30 miles an hour speed limit. Which is shocking, isn't it, really, when we hear that things were better 100 years ago. It really is shocking, and it gives us all motivation to keep going on what our ambitions are for our respective areas on the north. Obviously welcome that Leeds, Bradford, Preston speed improvement work that you're doing there. It'd be good to have a list of all those. This is 13 locations. I couldn't see the list of those. Obviously there's a number of stations listed in the document, but it'd be good to see where those are across the north. So that we can all sort of pile in behind those when we need to. I think also it talks about economic case, etc., but it does focus, I mean, and this is what going as the stations element of it, really, not the line speed stuff, but it may well be relevant for that as well. It talks about economic case, but I just wonder, are we taking our own medicine with this? Because the economic case, of course, should think about regeneration benefits of what we're doing here and not just line speeds, journey times, etc. So I just want to make sure that economic case for investment on stations and line speeds is taking a broader economic view of what transport can do for an area, and not just doing what has historically been done, which is just talk about speed and journey times.
In general terms, yes, we do include the work of TfN's team and the work they do on the analysis of the wider economic benefits. It's one of the strengths of us being part of TfN is to have that to draw on. We will be feeding that in at the appropriate moments into the journey time improvement schemes when we come to bid for funding for them, for all the reasons that you absolutely rightly set out. You know, it's an important element and it helps strengthen the business case. With the particular reliability improvements, potentially some of those are so small scale, it might be, where appropriate, we will try and point to the wider economic benefits from them. But yeah, wherever appropriate, wherever we can actually quantify a benefit from them, but some of them are actually so very cheap and cheerful that hopefully they might just have a much more straightforward and simple business case. With
the stations one, there's more potential, I think, and that's exactly where we'll work with local authorities, as I say, recognising that stations are part of the local area. And I think that's what we're saying. We can combine that with our evidence and probably clustering some of these together to make the strongest possible case to get more of the national more share of the national funding pot.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I was going to follow up on some of those points about stations that Susan's made as well, because I think one of the things I'm very conscious of is that kind of a lot of railway stations across the north of England are underutilised assets. They're not only just gateways to communities, but quite often, as part of the estate, the physical buildings can be underutilised. And actually, there's a lot you could do to kind of use a lot of what are basically redundant buildings as kind of incubators for small businesses on a peppercorn rent, and actually kind of anything we can do within the station strategy that kind of pushes that agenda forward would be great. But I think one of the other aspects I really wanted to raise is about the issue of accessibility in terms of how we're doing the station strategy. I'm delighted that we are, because when you look at the appendices, Appendix A, which lists the stations in the north that the government is funding to make them step free in this control period, so up until 2024, actually of the 15 listed, 2 are in North Wales and 3 are entirely on the Merseyrail network. So actually the fact that the government's only funding 10 stations across the whole of the north of England for the next few years to make them properly accessible, something's gone badly wrong there, that the north of England is missing out on the level of investment that we need. But I would sort of say that in the station strategy that we're pulling together, we need to be quite visionary about what is the programme to get all of our stations fully accessible in a suitable timescale. We are dealing with the sort of legacy of Victoria infrastructure here. I think one of the things we also need to react to, that I'm sure other members will have been getting lots of emails about, is the quite sort of correct and sort of strong campaign that guide dogs are putting forward about tactile paving on platforms as a basic safety requirement. That is something that we've got to reflect on how all of the north stations are going to be dealt with accordingly. But one of the other aspects I think we need to be thinking about in that station strategy is, yes, by all means we have to get every station fully accessible, but we also need to make sure that actually in the fullness of time we focus on making sure that it's fully accessible to get from the train, the platform to the train. What is our plan for level boarding in the fullness of time? I say that because we do have a direct answer here in the Liverpool City region, because the new trains for Merseyrail will have level boarding from the platform onto the train. I know how difficult the engineering solution can be to all of this, but at this moment in time, the rest of the wider rail industry, not just across the north but beyond, it's seen as being in much too much of the too difficult box. And unless we start thinking about what the vision is over the coming years and decades, quite frankly, it's unacceptable. I think that in perpetuity, someone with accessibility issues is dependent upon a ramp being put down for them, when in the fullness of time there is a proper engineering solution that can treat everybody equally. So for me, I'm delighted with doing that station strategy. I just hope it's really visionary and includes all of those kind of aspects in terms of our kind of forward view.
yeah, Liam, if I'm going to respond, just I think
that'd be great.
Really, yeah, absolutely. We want to set out the vision for the north. I think it's another advantage of working collaboratively across the north. There's loads of great work being done on stations in individual locations. I could reel them off, sort of Maryport in Cumbria, recent work at Castleford, Redcar, doing some great work about integrating with the you could go on and on, but out of 500 stations, that's still only quite a small list, and it only tends to tackle certain elements. So what we want to do is share that best practice right across the north. And I think when you actually start to look at it across the north, it makes a strong case, as you've said, for that national investment, because it's just bigger numbers and people travel right across the north. People don't just travel in one particular local authority area. I think it also allows us to share the best practice developed perhaps in some of the combined authority areas with the more rural areas as well, about best practice in different things. Some of the rural areas have done some good stuff in their own way, but we can share that around. So I think that's part of the plan here, really, and the level boarding in Mersey on Merseyrail is a good example of that. How can we apply that in other parts of the north? Maybe not everywhere, but there might be some routes that we can see will be appropriate. So I think that's the plan. The accessibility piece, as I will set out in more detail, the ambition around that. And I think you're right to highlight that whilst step-free access is important to everyone, actually not just people with reduced mobility, there's an awful lot of other improvements that improve accessibility for people with all sorts of other difficulties, and that's important that we tackle those as well and look at those which might not be sort of perhaps as eye-catching as some of the big investments, but I think it's important that we have a comprehensive plan and strategy for tackling that.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for that, David. I'm not seeing any other indications to speak, so I think that kind of brings us to the end of this item accordingly. Then actually that's the kind of the end of all of our agendaed items for this afternoon's meeting. So with all of that, I can thank you all for attending. I hope all remain safe and well with you, and we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting, be that virtual or hopefully very soon we can all meet together in person. So I know David will be in touch with future dates and arrangements accordingly. So thanks very much. I'll close the meeting and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.